They always told my family that coma was just a deep sleep. But when I finally opened my eyes, the first thing I whispered to the doctor was, "Why didn't you warn me about the corridor?" I didn't wake up peacefully. There was no gentle drifting back into my body, no warm light pulling me home. It felt more like being thrown upward, breaking through icy water. My eyes snapped open, and the world around me buzzed with a sterile electric hum. A ceiling lamp glared down at me, too bright, too real. For a moment I didn't trust it. Voices drifted in, my name repeated over and over, shaken, relieved. Hands touched my arms, my shoulders. Someone cried. Someone thanked God. Someone told me I was safe now. But their voices all sounded distant, muffled, as if I were still underwater. Because the only sound I truly heard, the only one my mind clung to, was the faint, steady beepy beep beep of my heart monitor. The same sound that had guided me for what felt like days, maybe weeks. The only sound that had kept me from dissolving into that place. I turned my head slightly. The room was small, full of machines and soft green lights. A nurse leaned over me with a trembling smile. "You're back," she said. "You're really back." I wanted to answer, but the words tangled in my throat. All I could think about was the silence, how complete it had been, how heavy, how it had tried to swallow me. I could still feel it breathing behind me, like it had followed me out. Someone dimmed the lights when I flinched. I murmured something about the brightness, about the shadows moving wrong. They thought I was confused, but I wasn't confused. I remembered everything. I remembered the peeling walls, the wet, echoing footsteps that never belonged to me, the endless hallway stretching forward into a blur of flickering lights. And far, far away, barely audible, as if coming from another world entirely, the soft, rhythmic beeping that meant my body was still waiting for me. I remembered walking toward it, terrified that if I stopped, the sound would fade, terrified that the silence would find me again. The doctor entered the room then, clipboard in hand. He looked relieved, almost joyful, but the moment our eyes met, something in his expression faltered. Just for a second. Just enough for me to know he recognized it too. The corridor, he knew. My voice finally pushed through, raw and cracked. "Don't turn off the lights," I whispered. "And please don't let the monitor stop beeping." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "We won't," he said softly. "You're safe." But I already knew the truth. The corridor wasn't gone. It never really lets go, not after you've walked it. The second night after I woke up, sleep refused to come. The room was dim, the monitors soft and steady, but every time I closed my eyes, the dark behind my eyelids didn't feel like rest. It felt like a doorway. Like if I let myself drift too far, I'd open my eyes somewhere else again. Somewhere with no windows, somewhere with no end. I stared at the ceiling, trying to slow my breathing. The memory had been pushing at me all day, but now it rose fully, unstoppable. The first moment I woke in the coma wasn't peaceful either. I had expected dreams, blurry, meaningless images, but instead I was standing upright, barefoot, in a hallway that didn't look real. At least, not real in the way it should have been. Long, cracked tiles stretched under my feet, their edges darkened as if water had seeped into them years ago and never dried. The walls were a sickly gray-green, peeling in strips like old skin. Rust stained the metal railings lining the corridor. Every few yards a ceiling lamp flickered, blinking like a dying eye. The air felt wet heavy, too cold. And the silence, God, the silence was suffocating. Then I heard it. Faint, distant, almost too far away to prove it existed. Beep, 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 not loud, not comforting. More like a lifeline stretched thin across a void. I remember whispering, "That's me! That's mine!" though my voice made no sound. I started walking toward it. Slowly at first, then faster when the shadows behind me seemed to thicken, as if the darkness were learning how to breathe. The first rule formed inside me without words. Move. Don't stop. Just keep going. I didn't know how I knew that stopping was wrong, only that the air around me changed when I hesitated. The silence deepened, gaining weight. pressing, waiting. Just once, I made the mistake of pausing. My legs were shaking, exhaustion crushing me. I leaned against the cold wall, and instantly the beeping dimmed, sinking like someone turning a dial down. Panic surged through me. I straightened, and in that moment, I swear I heard something soft behind me, a breath, or the scrape of a foot across the tile. I stumbled away, desperate, and the beeping sharpened again, like a thread pulling me forward. Back in the real hospital room, I blinked the memory away and glanced at my own heart monitor. The rhythm was steady, reassuring, but its sound wasn't the same. Thicker, closer, too tangible to be the one I had chased for what felt like miles. A shiver crawled down my spine, because now I knew something I hadn't understood then. That place wasn't a dream or hallucination or some medical illusion. It was a location, a somewhere, a hallway that existed without existing, waiting for people like me. And though I had walked it once, part of me could still feel the cold floor under my feet, the shadows clinging to the walls, the sense of something moving just out of sight. I closed my eyes for only a second and instantly felt too close to that place. My eyes snapped open. I wasn't going back. I couldn't. But deep down, a quiet truth pulsed with every beat of my heart. The corridor wasn't behind me. It was underneath everything, waiting, remembering me. The first real conversation happened on the third night. The ward was quiet, wrapped in that uneasy stillness that hospitals get after midnight. Most lights were dimmed, glowing a muted yellow across the linoleum, and nurses moved like whispers through the hallway outside my door. I was staring at the monitor again, watching the green line flick across the screen. Its steady beeping grounded me, but it also made the back of my neck prickle, because every time it paused between beats, the silence felt too familiar. I heard footsteps approach my bed. Slow, measured, not rushed like a nurse checking vitals, almost deliberate. I turned my head, and the doctor from my first day stood there, the one who had looked at me with recognition he tried to hide. His name tag read Dr. Halloran. I remembered that only because the letters seemed to tremble when I first woke, as if I were still half in that other place. He didn't smile this time. He studied me for a long moment, his expression more assessing than medical, like he was waiting for something. "How are you feeling tonight?" he asked softly. "Awake," I said, "too awake." His eyes flicked to the monitor, then back to me. "Any confusion? Strange dreams?" "Not dreams," I answered before I could stop myself. A tiny muscle in his jaw tightened. "You remember things." It wasn't a question, it was a confirmation. I swallowed. "You know what I'm talking about." He looked toward the door as if making sure no one was close enough to hear, then stepped nearer, lowering his voice. "Most patients don't remember, and when they do," he trailed off. I finished for him. "You pretend they imagined it." He didn't deny it. The room felt colder, though nothing had changed. A soft draft slid across my arms, lifting goosebumps. "Tell me," I whispered. "Why does it feel so familiar to you?" He hesitated. That alone terrified me, because doctors don't hesitate with things like this. Not unless the truth is worse than the illusion. Finally, he spoke, each word careful, cautious. "Some of us have heard descriptions before, enough times to recognize patterns." "Patterns," I repeated. "Like the corridor." His face drained of color so fast I wondered if he might faint. I'd struck the nerve he was trying to bury. But instead of answering, he asked quietly, "How much do you remember?" "Everything." He closed his eyes, not dramatically, but like a man confirming his worst suspicion. "I see," he murmured. For a moment, he looked less like a doctor and more like someone standing at the edge of a confession. Someone who knew a terrifying truth but wasn't supposed to share it. I pushed gently. "Why didn't anyone warn me?" His voice barely rose above a whisper. "Because most people never go far enough in to understand what they're walking through. And the ones who come back," he paused, searching for the right words, "they don't usually want to talk about it." I stared at him. "But you know it's real." His eyes met mine again, and for one brief second, just one, I saw fear there, not of me, of whatever followed me back. But then he straightened, as if forcing the fear down, burying it under professionalism. "You should rest," he said quietly, his tone suddenly brisk. "Your body needs time." His pivot was too quick, too practiced. A retreat. He turned to leave, and I watched him walk toward the doorway. But right before he stepped out, he paused, shoulders tightening. He didn't look back when he said, "If you hear the beeping change, call someone immediately." A chill crawled up my spine. "Why? What does that mean?" He exhaled shakily. "It means the place you were in still remembers your heartbeat." Then he walked away. I lay frozen, staring at the door long after it closed, my pulse thundering in my ears. Because now I knew the truth I'd only suspected before. I wasn't the only one who had seen the corridor, but I might be the only one it noticed. The fourth night was when the memory of him finally came back in full. I didn't ask for it. It didn't rise gently or gradually. It hit me like a cold hand closing around my throat, dragging me straight back into that endless place. I was lying in the hospital bed, half awake, the room washed in dim blue light. The monitor's steady rhythm lulled me just enough that my guard slipped, and the moment I drifted too close to sleep, I was walking again. I felt the cracked tiles beneath my bare feet before I even saw them. The stale, metallic air brushed my skin, and the lights overhead flickered like they were struggling to stay alive. The corridor stretched out in front of me, the same desolate, abandoned hospital hallway that had swallowed me whole before. But this time, the beeping in the distance wasn't faint. It was frantic, sharp, urgent, as if something on the other side, my body, was fighting for me. I started walking faster, breath shallow. But after only a few steps, I sensed something new. A presence. Not just the heavy silence or the shifting shadows, something deliberate, something watching. I didn't want to look. Every instinct screamed not to, but I turned my head anyway, and I saw him. At the very end of the corridor, so far he was only a thin silhouette under a flickering light, stood a man in a white coat. A doctor, or at least that's what he wanted me to think. He lifted one hand and waved. Slow, friendly. Wrong. Then he pointed toward a set of elevator doors beside him. Elevators that had not been there before. Elevators that absolutely shouldn't have existed in that place. The beeping behind me quickened, as if urging me to move toward it. But he took a step toward me and smiled. Not a human smile. Too wide, too patient. I froze. And that was when I remembered the second rule. So suddenly and sharply it felt like someone whispered it directly into my ear. If a doctor calls you to the elevator, run. There are no elevators leading back to life. That's the collector. He took another step. His shoes made no sound at all. The floor beneath him didn't echo like it should have. "Come on," he said softly. His voice was warm, comforting, like someone coaxing a frightened child. But underneath, the warmth was something else, an emptiness so deep it sounded bottomless. The elevator behind him opened with a soft chime. A chime I had heard 1,000 times in real hospitals. Except this one vibrated wrong, like metal scraping underneath the sound. I took one shaky step backward. His smile sharpened. "Don't make this difficult," he said gently. "You're tired. You've walked long enough. Let me help." Behind me, the beeping thinned, like my connection to my body was stretching, pulling, almost tearing. Panic punched through me. I turned and ran, sprinting toward the distant echo of my own heartbeat. The corridor seemed to warp as I moved. Lights blurring, shadows twisting. The floor tilting like it was trying to throw me off balance. And behind me, footsteps, soft, steady, too close. I didn't dare look back. If I did, I knew I'd freeze, and freezing meant the silence would swallow the beeping whole. I ran until my lungs felt scorched, until my legs nearly gave out. The beeping grew louder, bright, frantic, real. Then a hand brushed my shoulder. Cold, too long-fingered, almost gentle. I cried out and the entire world snapped. I gasped awake in my hospital bed, soaked in sweat, heart racing so violently the monitor alarmed. A nurse rushed in, adjusting wires, asking questions, trying to steady me. But all I could whisper was, "He touched me! He touched me!" The nurse didn't understand, but when Dr. Halloran entered moments later, he did. His face went pale. He didn't ask what touched me. He only asked one question, voice low and tight. "Was he wearing a white coat?" I nodded. His expression collapsed into something horrifying, recognition mixed with dread. "Then you need to understand," he whispered. "If he touched you, he knows your heartbeat now." And suddenly, I felt colder than that corridor had ever been. For 2 days after the nightmare, no one left me alone. Nurses checked my vitals every hour. Dr. Halloran hovered like a storm cloud just outside my door. Even my family noticed the tension in the air, though no one explained anything to them. They thought doctors were just being cautious after a long coma. But I knew better. The collector had touched me. And somehow, everyone who had seen patients like me before understood what that meant. On the 5th night, the hospital felt suffocatingly quiet. My room lights were low, casting soft halos across the walls. I tried to focus on the rhythmic beeping beside me, my anchor, my proof that I was still here. Yet something felt off. It took me a moment to realize what it was. The silence around the beeping wasn't normal. It was too thick, too expectant. The kind of silence that belonged back in the corridor. A cold unease slipped through me. I pressed the call button, but it flickered instead of lighting up. Not broken, just delayed, like something was interfering. I tried again. Same flicker. That's when I felt the air change. Not colder, not darker, just closer. Like the world had leaned in to listen. And then, without warning, a whisper surfaced in my memory. A rule I didn't remember learning, but now felt unmistakably familiar. One that rose from the same place inside me where the other two had burned themselves into my instincts. Rule 3. If you hear your heartbeat in the room, but it's not coming from the monitor, don't move. He's already inside. My breath hitched. I didn't want to believe it, but the next second I heard it. Thump, 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 not electronic, not mechanical. Wet, heavy, too close. It wasn't coming from the machine. It was coming from the far corner of the room. I froze. The sound grew louder, slow, deliberate, like something large was breathing through my pulse. I stared at the monitor, forcing my eyes to stay there, terrified of what I'd see if I looked elsewhere. Then, a shadow shifted. Not the jittery kind made by passing headlights or moving nurses. This one rose from the floor, tall, wrong, bending the dim light around it. My fingers curled into the sheet. I didn't blink. I didn't breathe. Because the third rule was clear. Movement meant attention. The shadow stretched across the wall, long-limbed, slow, like it was learning the shape of the room. Nothing touched me, but every instinct screamed that something was selecting, choosing, deciding. The heartbeat in the corner grew louder, syncing with mine until it felt like the room itself was pulsing. My monitor suddenly spiked, then steadied, shrieking a warning I couldn't interpret. I wanted to scream, but even that felt dangerous. Then the whisper came, not from the corner, from right beside my ear. "So tired," a voice murmured. "You've walked so far. Let me finish what you started." I nearly broke the rule. My muscles jerked, desperate to yank away, to run, to tear the IV out and flee anywhere but here. But I stayed frozen, tears slipping silently down my cheeks. The voice breathed in as if inhaling my fear. "Good," it whispered. "Stay still." Footsteps sounded in the hallway, real ones, and the spell cracked. A nurse opened the door, and instantly the shadow collapsed, sucked into the room's darkness like it had never existed. The heartbeat in the corner died. Only the monitor remained. The nurse didn't notice anything. She just frowned at my heart rate and adjusted the wires. But as she turned to leave, she paused, concerned. "You look like you saw a ghost." I didn't trust myself to speak, so I didn't. Later, when Dr. Halloran came in, he closed the door quietly and leaned close. "You heard it, didn't you?" he said. not accusing, mourning. I nodded. He sank into the chair beside my bed, face drawn, haunted. "There's a reason most people don't escape the corridor," he said softly. "You think it ends when you wake up, but the things in there, they notice you. And once they do, they try to bring you back." His voice trembled. "That's why no one talks about the third rule." My stomach tightened. "Because it means he's here." "No," he whispered. "Because it means he's not done." For the first time since waking, I realized something terrifying. The collector didn't want me wandering the corridor anymore. He wanted me delivered. I climbed the attic steps with the flashlight trembling in my hand, every creak beneath my feet tightening around my ribs like a warning. The air grew colder as I reached the top, the kind of cold that felt intentional, directed. The door to the attic was already cracked open, as if someone had slipped inside just moments before me. I pushed it wider. The beam of light sliced through the dust and landed on the same wooden table where I'd first found the envelope. But now the table wasn't empty. A single object rested in the center, my lopsided childhood bracelet made of blue glass beads. The one I lost when I was 10. My throat closed. I hadn't seen that bracelet in 15 years. I stepped closer, the floor soft beneath my feet, almost spongy. When I glanced down, the boards weren't the same dark wood anymore. They were shifting, grain twisting like living muscle. I stumbled back, but the door behind me slammed shut so hard the bulb inside my flashlight flickered. A whisper crawled through the room. "Stay a little longer, you left so much behind." I spun in a circle, but the attic was no longer an attic. The walls had stretched upward, bending, curving into impossible angles. Corners folded like paper. Shadows pooled in spirals along the floor. Then I noticed the photos, hundreds of them. They covered the walls, dangling from strings like low-hanging fruit. Each one showed me at different ages, sleeping, running, crying, laughing, captured from perspectives no one should have been able to see. My lungs forgot how to work. A soft thud came from behind the table. Something moved into view, just barely brushing against the edge of the light. It stepped wrong, like its bones weren't arranged correctly. Its shape warped each time I blinked, but it had a familiar outline. Tall, narrow shoulders, the tilt of a head I'd seen in the mirror since childhood. The thing wore my face, not the face I had now, but the face I'd had when I was 9. It smiled crookedly, as if the muscles didn't quite understand the command. "You came back. I kept everything just the way you left it." I backed toward the door, but the handle melted into the wall like wet wax. The room pulsed. The walls breathed in. The creature child stepped closer, its eyes bright and glassy like the beads on the bracelet. "You shouldn't have forgotten me." I felt the floor peel open beneath my heels, and the whole room bent inward, dragging me toward it like a mouth preparing to swallow. The floor yawned open beneath me, boards curling like wet paper, and I threw myself forward before the darkness could swallow my legs. My palms slammed against the warped surface, splinters biting deep, but I barely felt the pain. The creature wearing my childhood face tilted its head, watching with a patient amusement that made my stomach drop. "Don't fight it," it whispered, voice soft and coaxing. "You lived here first. You belong here. With me." The room lurched sideways. Photos shook loose from their strings, raining down around me. Each one landed with a papery sigh. My birthdays, my school mornings, the nights I cried quietly so no one would hear. All of it cataloged, preserved like someone had been archiving my life in real time. I pushed myself upright, breath ragged. "You're not me." The creature smiled wider than my bones ever could. "I'm the part you abandoned, and this house kept me alive." The floor shifted again, opening cracks that glowed faintly, like light leaking from a heartbeat under the boards. Something pulsed beneath us, warm, rhythmic, alive. A house shouldn't breathe, but this one inhaled, its walls rounding outward, exhaling with a moan so low it trembled through my teeth. I staggered toward the window. The glass, once fogged and gray, now reflected only darkness. No trees, no stars, just an endless black surface as if the outside world had been erased. When I pressed my fingers to it, the glass rippled like water. Behind me, small footsteps approached, soft, deliberate. "You left me alone for so long," it murmured. "But I waited. I always wait. That's what the forgotten parts do. They bide their time." I turned slowly. The creature was inches from me, its breath cold against my chin. Its eyes flickered not like reflections, but like candles struggling in a storm. "Let me out," I whispered. "Please." Its tiny hand reached up and touched my cheek. The nails were too long, the skin too smooth. "You can leave," it said, "but something of you has to stay." The window behind me shuddered, its surface widening like an opening throat. A roaring wind pulled at my clothes, dragging me backward. The creature didn't fight it. It simply smiled, stepping aside as if presenting a door. The last thing I saw before the darkness took me was my own reflection in its eyes, older, frightened, and fading, while the house inhaled one final time, claiming whatever part of me it had chosen to keep.